All right, we're back.
Yes, we are.
Things are recording.
It's hot.
It's hot. It went from like, it felt like fall here for like almost a
Yeah,
week.
it was almost, well, it was kind of chilly.
Yeah.
And then today it's bing, 25 to 30 degrees.
I was joking that I had a tan that I thought I was going to be able to keep like 3 weeks ago.
Well, that's the thing is I'm
was
getting
just
like the
gone.
fucking marks again. I'm like, shit.
Okay, that I blame on the gym being far away. So you got to adopt a strategy
Yes.
that I've adopted, which is
I need tank tops. That's
Yeah.
what the strategy
Well,
is. Then I get a white beater
I
tank.
just ride bike shirtless now if I go out.
Fuck it. There you go. I like it.
If
Yeah,
it's,
but I get the backpack. Doesn't work.
yeah, that's tough. Can you strap to the back? Do you have
I
a
can
small
find a way.
one?
Yeah, enough.
Yeah, like so.
But I need to buy those.
What I found is if you're committing to 90 minutes a day on the bike, 4 to 6 times a week,
at least an hour.
it's pretty much.
It's not 90 minutes for me.
It
It's
is for me.
45.
It
But
is
yeah,
for me.
okay, yeah.
But I'm further away, not
Yeah,
just slow.
exactly.
But
And I have an e-bike, let's be honest.
But so the issue is like I'll get there, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it can be cloudy, but when I'm done, I'm warm.
Yeah.
I'm hot, and I'm not
Okay,
wearing a
yeah.
t-shirt and going to be miserable and have tan lines.
The only thing for me, you know what it is? Me, it's the head tattoo. Like now that summer arrives, I'm gonna have to start, especially since I get the other side on June
You
30th.
got it on the neck. We could just get you a do-rag.
Oh, there you go. Finally,
White,
my life
white
is
French
complete.
guy with a do-rag.
My life is complete.
Oh shit!
I need I bought some actually to protect the tattoos, the
Yeah.
sunscreen. Yep.
That's a thing I never worried about that too much. I just got like some scabby, shitty tattoos over the course of the years to where my
this
my
one,
level
come
of interest is like, this whole thing I'm carrying to the grave, we're going to kind of skid there and
No,
rust it
no.
apart.
Respect. I respect the artists that imprinted my skin.
I treat it more like graffiti. Like, listen, this building's coming. This
tag.
building's coming down at some point. You want to get something on it?
They tag you, go ahead, tag me. Yeah.
I had a friend who got a tattoo of like it was like one of the first things where I realized you don't have to take them all so seriously. Just out of the blue, right on his arms, just like a tattoo of like a bunny jacking off. And I was like, and everyone's like, how in the world could you do that? And I was like, but once you round that corner, there's a lot of fun little tattoo options you can get. Like, what? Because the whole thing, it's like, I've always been a free spirit, so I got, a butterfly above my ass crack. You're
exactly.
like, all right, great,
Right. That two people in their whole life are gonna see.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, anyway, we're back.
Yes,
we're in the heat. Also, by the way, you had the heat on.
Because it's where I
Because
dry
it
my
was
clothes.
cold.
Yeah, it was close. Plus, this is where I dry my clothes.
So
Because I have a washing machine, but I don't have a dryer.
So I come in and set up after riding bike, already sweaty, and I'm like, this is a fucking trap. This whole thing.
And the
so-
fluffy killer is back.
So we're gonna build this week upon from last week.
Yes, we are. We're gonna actually, we're gonna build up a bit and put it into a practical conversation.
And I say last week when actually,
Not for you guys.
it's been. I think they will be getting, by the time they get this, like 7 episodes in 14, 15 days.
There we go.
So
Aye.
we've got a lot of notes. So lactate and depression, anxiety. Is that kind of the big
Depression.
steps?
Yeah, I want to go.
Depression
I want to further the conversation. Oh, yeah. So my prop as a super villain is here, so we can start.
That's good.
I want to go into depression as a practical application of the conversation by glycolysis.
Okay.
Glycolysis. Still not sure. Glycolysis. I'm going to say glycolysis.
Okay.
So last week we stopped as the lactate is the end product.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I went much further. Did I go into the MCTs?
I think
Little
only
bit.
very briefly.
Okay, cool. All right. So let me...
I think you were hinting at the correlation. with the two
Right.
today.
So I want you guys to take a trip with me. And the foundation, the foundation of this trip is lactate is a fuel and the end product of glycolysis. Okay. And glycolysis. And then we go from there, right?
Okay.
So there's other very interesting part. For example, lactate, travels from the muscle to the blood to the brain, back and forth, and things like this. So it is transported by something called a MCT. The T is transporter.
Okay.
There's different kinds. There's really 8 kinds of MCTs. The one that interests us is the 1, the 2, and the 4 for this conversation. So what's very interesting about that is that the MCT4 is a transporter that you find essentially in the white muscles, the fast twitch fibers,
Okay.
right? And some in the fast oxidative fibers. The MCT1, you're not going to find in the fast twitch glycolytic fiber, the type 2B, you're not going to find it there. You're going to find it in a type 1 fiber. So maybe we should explain a little bit what that is.
Yes.
Right. So you have two types of muscle fibers, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is what they call the slow oxidative fibers. So slow, that means endurance-based, like aerobic and everything. And then you have the type 2 fibers, which is the fast twitch fibers. But in those, you have the 2A, which is a fast oxidative fibers, since in the presence of oxygen. Then you have the type 2B, which is what they call the fast glycolytic fibers, which you would have to redefine again, which is completely anaerobic. So they're not glycolytic, they're anaerobic, since they're both glycolytic. Anyway, right, so that changes a bit. The 2A can switch to 2B back and forth. There's an entire thing there.
But never 2 to 1.
Never 2 to 1, that's different. So it's going to become very important. So the MCT4s you find essentially with the 2B fiber. You find some with 2A, a lot with 2B. The reason is that anaerobic stuff produces even more lactate than the aerobic. The aerobic also, clears the lactate into pyruvate to feed the mitochondria and all that stuff. So anyway, anaerobic produces a lot of lactate. You end up with a lot of fuel on your hands. The MCT1 is found essentially in the type 1 fiber, slow oxidative.
Okay.
Right, so that's the transporter. Transporter does both things. It takes the lactate to the muscle and away from it. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What's very interesting with the MCT4, we're going to get to it, is that it carries the lactate to the brain, to what is called the astrocytes, which is a support cell in the brain that is responsible for everything, including neuroplasticity, stuff like that.
Okay.
Right, so right away, you can see already a pattern. That means that the lactate is transported to different parts of the body based on how it is produced. Sorry, not how it is produced, because it's always produced by glycolysis. Based as where it is produced.
Okay.
Where the lactate is produced will mean it will be delivered in different places.
Help me out with that one.
Right, so fast twitch 2B fibers have more MCT4.
Okay.
MCT4, MCT1 will not carry the lactate to the same places in the body.
Okay.
And they're being produced, but they're not being, they don't target the same areas of the body.
Okay.
So they both target lactate, but they pick it up in a different place and they take it to a different place.
Where are these places?
Right. So MCT4 goes to the astrocytes, which is those support cells in the brain.
Yeah.
Right. The MCT1, it's basically taking away from muscle and going somewhere else, not to the brain. Because I can go into plasma and stuff like that, but what interests me is the brain aspect.
Okay.
Right. So that
for the sake of the depression conversation.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So because I'm going to stay a little bit on target, otherwise I have to go into.
You heard him first.
Right. Exactly. Because then, for example, the MCT2s also take the lactate to the astrocytes, but not from the muscle directly, from somewhere else. And so I can go into plasma and red blood cells if you want.
There's a lot of if-then statements.
Right,
here
and then we can go plasma, red blood cells, and then we're having fun. But I'm going to stay on target. Right, so what's interesting with the astrocytes as a support cell is the only cells in the brain that carry glycogen.
Okay.
They actually have glycogen stores. The reason they have glycogen stores is they're going to take that glycogen, turn it into lactate to fuel the neurons, to give to the neurons to keep their thing going.
Okay.
So very interesting part, right? So that means that literally the lactate is the fuel for the brain through the MCT4s that are being produced mostly through the type 2 fibers. Right, so, and type
You
specially...
keep giving me this look of comprehension,
Exactly.
and I'm like, well, I can't add anything, so you got to keep going.
Right, okay. So, fuel for the brain is lactate that is produced in fast twitch fibers.
Okay.
So the brain is fueled by fast twitch fibers.
Okay.
That's fairly interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we're going to go more into this, but you don't find that interesting. I find that fascinating. But anyway, and especially by 2B
I'm trying to think
fibers.
of what the exception is then, as far as like what is the deal on the other side? Just keep going.
No. That's how the fuel is basically being fueled. It goes through the fast twitch fibers. What the reason I'm smirking is because remember, like the only way out of freeze is fight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And fight is going to be,
Heavy sympathetic response.
And fast twitch, exactly, all that stuff, right? And lactate, obviously. Right. So the amount of glycogen that is stored in astrocytes is regulated by norepinephrine and serotonin.
Okay.
Back to norepinephrine. So what I find very interesting about this too is astrocytes are, so lactate, that means through the astrocyte is a signaling molecule for, that we know that, for the LC. The part of the brain that produces norepinephrine. That is the main regulator of how much glycogen is carried in astrocytes. So therefore, how much fuel can get into the brain.
Okay.
So you keep going into a circle that points to sympathetic, fast twitch fibers, and fuel. And so that means that, you know, without the sympathetic side, there is no fuel for the brain.
Well, and it's interesting because that does also sound like a learning mechanism, and that has to constantly adapt. Meaning, if you don't go there, your capacity for the fuel is less and less and less.
Yes,
and less.
exactly. What's very interesting is the LC, that part of the brain is, we also see that as responsible for behavior inhibition, for posture. Go figure. For a number of things like that. Like I got some of the notes. The reason I got the notes is that I can stay on target, because I promised myself I wouldn't go left and right. So we have stress and panic, arousal and sleep-wake cycle, attention and memory, behavior flexibility and inhibition, cognitive control, emotion, neuroplasticity, posture and balance. That's interesting. Yeah. And for example, the MCT2 that is not to carry lactate will go toward will have an action on the glutamatergic synapses. So glutamate being
such a catchy phrase.
And trust me, I have to memorize them because every time I was like, can't you guys use normal words? Jesus Christ. What matters is glutamate is the most excitatory neurotransmitter that we have.
Okay.
So back to lactate as, in that case, an excitatory signaling molecule. Again, every single time. In the brain, it seems to act as an excitatory molecule. It's a fuel. So, by the way, that's actually, it's a fuel, but that's, we're going to see also what the lactate does independently of being a fuel source. So it seems that lactate is not just fuel. It also does a lot more stuff than that.
Okay.
But so right away, how do I look at this? So let me go back into anxiety before I can go into depression just a little bit. Do you remember that when I talked about anxiety and how to, with the symptoms, you had what? You had steady cardio, sprints, strength training in the studies. Yeah. Right. Steady cardio is type 1 fiber, sprints is type 2A, strength training is type 2B. Right. So that means that you have so fibers, muscle fibers are linked to how to fight anxiety symptoms. Remember anxiety sensitivity?
Which is the, what's the word? It's sensitivity to the symptoms?
Right, exactly. Of anxiety, right, exactly. Right. So you have the physical one. The best way to do that was strength training. Right. So that means that anxiety toward physical symptoms, we know the stuff is strengthening, which is 2B fibers. That's a lot of MCT4s. Yeah. So that means that you could check, maybe, there you go, that the anxiety sensitivity toward physical symptoms will have an issue with MCT4s. So they're probably low on MCT4s. That would make sense. Yeah. Right. Whereas anxiety sensitivity...
As just a marker.
As a marker.
As a marker.
Yeah, as a marker. Yeah, it's not to give a pill of MCT.
Listen, that's
I know where this is going to go. I know exactly where they're going to go with it. But if you look at anxiety sensitivity towards social condition, we know the best way to deal with this is steady cardio, type 1, which is MCT1, which happens to be reuptake of lactate. Yeah. Not uptake, but reuptake of lactate. Yeah. So now you could see that. So that type of anxiety, the problem would be in MCT1s. So that would be something to measure. Right. So that means muscle fibers and training equal anxiety symptoms. Distress tolerance, we know it's sprints and strength training. So fast twitch fibers. Yeah. MCT4. Some MCT1, mostly MCT4s. So you have muscle fiber, anxiety symptoms, MCT. Right. So muscle fibers
all that sit in this very neat 1, 2A, 2B thing as well.
Even, with always some, it's percentage based, right?
But I think that's the subcategorization of that.
Right. So you have muscle fibers, type of training. All right. I know that one because I can put external torque, internal torque into that one. Right. So external torque naturally is going to go more toward the fast twitch fibers. So sympathetic, parasympathetic, internal torque, external torque, muscle fibers, MCTs, anxiety symptoms. and it all fits nicely
Yeah.
into a box.
And that's not
That's
all,
not
is
bad.
there?
Based on fuel
Yeah.
alone. Oh no, the depression, it keeps on going.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a neat. So the MCT, so if I could test the level of lactate of on a trained person at rest, which we're doing right now with women, but I know more or less the level of anxiety that they have. But if I could, and if I'm correct, do the same thing with MCTs, I don't know if it's feasible or not, I'm looking into it, I could just through basically the muscle, just by doing an assessment of, for example, with the sculpt.
Sculpt, yeah.
Right, the sculpt, right. Knowing where internal torque versus external torque, levels of lactate in the blood, level of MCTs, I could tell exactly what the symptoms of anxiety are.
Mm-hmm. Wild.
Wild.
Where do you start with this?
Testing.
Testing is going to be
testing.
Because there really isn't much correlative data yet either. I mean,
not on the MCTs.
Unless it's just floating out there to be sorted.
Zero on the MCTs. Yeah. No, not on the MCTs because they're not. Again, you're facing the issue that lactate is a waste product. Mm-hmm. The second you say that, none of this matters.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of the information is there, just no one wants to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so as a coach, that means that if we do this correctly, just on anxiety, I could have a protocol where just through testing, you can see exactly where people are. You put the questionnaires in there, and then you have anxiety versus depression. You could have a full testing protocol for your clients from the questionnaire, but also physically as where the symptoms of their imbalances are. So that means that a physical imbalance and a mental imbalance is the same.
Yeah.
When it comes to anxiety.
And very specifically when we talk about imbalances from muscle group to muscle group, side to side, via the sculpt, that ties in with emotional mapping, and then the same thing with lactate.
Mm-hmm. So that means that anxiety...
So really is another layer.
So anxiety as a driver.
Yeah.
So therefore anxiety is a physical component.
Yeah.
Not a mental.
Because we've talked about using, say, the sculpt as an assessment tool simply to give you another piece of the picture,
exactly.
Right? And to be able to also see when there's been change. And I think that the testability of this is just fantastic because it takes us much beyond. So you can talk about it.
Yep.
But the nice thing is at the very least we can start with the lactate data that's going to be fairly easy to get.
Yeah, like we're getting a box. They're sending me the machine.
Nice.
And you need the stripes. You put the blood, and we know.
Nice.
So we wake up in the morning. Like, am I? If it works, and we're right, obviously. Wake up in the morning. Am I anxious or not? So let's say I wake up and instead of doing my normal 1.5, I'm at 3.5.
Yeah.
It's a lot of lactate flowing and everything is not going anywhere. I'm like, let me go do some running. Let me go do some cardio. Let's get all the stuff going. You know what I mean? We could adjust based on that.
What about a baseline for this? Because we don't really know
Seems
where a baseline
to be 1.5
is that about
minimal.
As far as with just lactate, yes, that would be just
lactate
kind of
at rest. It seems to be around 1.5 on trained athletes.
Okay.
Remember, muscle at rest are net producers of lactate.
Okay.
So is the brain, so fat cells.
Yeah.
So there's a conversation that is interesting as well. Is everything produces lactate? Mm-hmm. Right. So lactate as a waste product. That means we continuously produce poison. So again, fat cells, muscle, the heart, the brain, so the whole body produces lactate because it's fuel. But so that means it has to be moved around, especially during the day. Right, so you're going to see a lot of things like this. So lactate as a fuel, it starts to make a lot more sense. You know what I mean? So that means like from the beginning, the lactate is being released. It's like, all right. But so those kind of tests would tell us, what do I need to do then? Based on, I think that could be very, very interesting. The first step is testing. But knowing that like you walking around instead of a 1.5 that's double your baseline tells you something. And if anxiety is a physical component, like I think, then it's telling you, okay, I need to clear that.
Yeah.
So does that mean, like, again, with the MCTs, it would tell us better. But even if we don't have that, because I don't know if we can test for it, honestly, or not, I'm asking Wim, they're going to look into it. You can test for it, but is it feasible, is the question. Like, can a coach...
Is it worth it
to us? Is it feasible? Because my idea would be to teach that to coaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
on the mentoring program and all
the
that
MCT,
stuff.
we basically... if it's not something that's easy to be done in the field, that's something we would just want to bark up the system and hope that somebody is going to start grabbing that data at some point.
Right, exactly. So we could do for a study. No, we'll do a study
Yeah.
with MCTs because I want to know if I'm right or not, and we need to test it. But that doesn't mean I can teach it to coaches.
Yeah.
Like imagine if it's a fucking like.
Well, the thing is,
it's a Megatron shit, and
Well, is that we're already you're already close with this, right? And,
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would say
believe I got it.
is from looking at it is, I mean, unless you're training for the Olympics that currently don't have a start date, or any of the sports right now that currently don't have a start date, like, is your okay, we haven't had that talk.
Did you see the shit about the CrossFit Games? Sorry, I have to.
Hold on, just 1 second. Is that as opposed to a pharmaceutical intervention for anxiety, depression,
Right, exactly.
or
point.
as opposed
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
any sort of training methodology that you're just going to do this month.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the fucking
Not
what's the
knowing-
risk?
yeah.
Where's our risk here?
Yes.
You're gonna do some regular ass training that might be misaligned and isn't gonna fuck your world
And
up.
by the way, the Germans were doing that because you remember they had that grip thing,
Yeah.
and if your grip wasn't strong that day, that means your sympathetic went rest day.
Yeah.
So that idea has been around for a long time.
Yeah, and but I think for this to be a thing that can be tried by a person before there's a fuckload of data, your risk is fucking none.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, and lactate is not that hard to
and
take.
at the very least, I will say, in the case of anything involving anxiety, depression, is that trying to fix it
is
already part of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So if you're leaning back on this and going, well, I better wait for all this data, I'm like, why don't you just fucking try the thing?
So just for a minute,
Okay.
you did not see the Instagram from Armen. So Dave Castro said that the 2020 CrossFit Games will be the last games he programs.
And then he might hand it over to Froning.
Jewish Froning.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta laugh at that.
Which
one.
is the great way for Froning to protect his legacy by just murdering everybody.
Right, and so that means CrossFit as a sport. Anyway,
Yeah.
right. So, so we're there. Like it makes. By the way, in the running world, the MCTs are very famous.
Okay.
Because everybody is obsessed with that, because MCT1 means reuptake, which is the obsession of runners, right? Because you can't, eventually you
don't want
run
it to
out of glucose.
accumulate, yeah.
Well, in the wrong way.
Yeah.
You don't want it to accumulate, but in their case, because they see it as a waste product. The reuptake means lactate can be used as fuel.
Yeah.
It can be broken down, gluconeogenesis. It can be used as fuel again. So there's a number of reasons why, on a runner, obviously, that would be very interesting. So, and the MCT4s as well, because they go toward the brain and all that stuff. So I know that after it's just a matter of whether we'll be able to have a protocol for testing or not. For the lactate, no question.
Yeah.
We can start right away. So I want to teach that to the coaches because I think it'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And so lactate, in that sense, is very interesting already within movement patterns and all that stuff. So again, external torque, movement pattern, internal torque, external torques, muscle fibers, anxiety symptoms, lactate, MCTs. So you can see how you can link all this. All right, so now let's go to our depression. Depression is a freeze mode. We know it's toward the dorsal vagus nerve, so it's conservation of energy. So when you go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So you could see, in a way, as a problem of fuel in the brain as well. We remember the selfish...
Absence of fuel?
Well, that's the question.
Deficit?
Deficit, I would go. Not absence, because
of course, yeah.
but deficit, right? There's an interesting rabbit hole there. So we're going to talk about lactate as not as a fuel, but as an antidepressant and as a anti-inflammatory. But before we do that, let's go as the fuel just for a second. So lactate is the fuel, right? Is the fuel for the brain. We know that. We see the relationship with the sympathetic. We know depression happens toward the parasympathetic side, toward the dorsal vagus nerve. If you've listened to me, I think like a lot of the fight mode happens when the parasympathetic and sympathetic work together. Right? When the parasympathetic work by itself, you mostly get a freeze mode, which is where depression lives.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a relationship there that I find interesting.
Anything one-sided in that regard is kind of deficient.
Right. Exactly. So imagine what a lactate deficit would be. For example, a lactate, in that sense, a lactate deficit could be created by someone who is not using their fast twitch muscle.
Not producing,
right.
essentially.
Right. So they're producing lactate to other stuff, but they're not having the MCT4s. Right. So it's not carried to the brain. So you're producing the lactate, and no matter how hard you go with your running, you're producing the lactate, but it doesn't go to the brain enough. So you're lacking the fuel.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know because that's not studied, but that would kind of make sense. That'd be interesting to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of the MCT4s. So we could test depressed people, see if they're low on the MCT4s. Please don't do a pill with MCT4s. Please, let's not do that. Because I'm going to get into the pills and I'll show you exactly what it does. But I mean, that would be an interesting idea, right? A lactate deficit.
Yeah.
And you would see a high rate of depression amongst runners, or they want to go faster. So there's a lot of anxiety in the running world and everything. But I'm wondering, I would like to do toward the testing as well. We know through testing that there's about twice as many women that have symptoms of depression than men. And yet, if you ask, most men will say they're depressed, more women will say they're anxious. So you have as many anxious men as women, but you have twice as many depressed women as men, and yet women will not say they're depressed, they will say they're anxious.
That's my first time hearing that.
It's funny.
Do you have a theory as to why?
Well, it's a social...
Because I think it's about what people identify that gap as, right?
Yeah.
So a man who is going to claim that they're depressed when actually it's maybe more anxious. Is that the term?
I don't know. Or maybe
or they're just more to it. Is that I think as a man we feel like action sympathetic is our call.
Yeah.
So anything short of that at all feels like depression. You know what I mean? I feel like when we talk about a gap between expectations, right?
I'll agree.
If I
social
don't
level,
feel like I can go out and fuck and kill and destroy and eat and
I'm
hunt,
depressed.
I'm depressed. I guess there's got to be something wrong with me.
Well, and technically...
And it may just be that you're a little backed off on the sympathetic knob.
Right, but if you look at expression of sympathetic, and that's going to be on that next podcast, expression of sympathetic for men and women is different.
Yes.
For men, it's fucking things up.
Yeah.
Conquering a town, or like that. With women are interested in people, men in things. Yeah. So the expression of the sympathetic is different.
Yeah.
So there's an entire thing there.
Yeah.
But I know that's an interesting idea.
I thought that was a really interesting.
Yeah,
I hadn't had a chance to think it of it through.
Because obviously depression has a lot of because I didn't tell him again. Why would I tell him?
Well, this is part of the deal. Is I've got 4 or 5 studies in the
exactly
for the library today, and I was like, I can't even look at these before the podcast.
Plus, the new ones are
unreadable.
fucking bitch.
Well, I go through with Megan when we pick the depending on some of these you can't even use an intro to have like some sort of text.
Some of them the title you don't understand.
Yeah, so like when I go to put it in the library, I was like, I need to put a teaser or some sort of explanation, and I like to use their own words. And then I look at it, I'm like, just copy and paste this intro, whatever this. I don't know what it means, and that's where it sits. Even
the title, you don't understand. It's absurd at this stage. Yeah. But this is literally what you have to go through to dig for stuff. It's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Like it's an entry level that is insane.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody can learn from this field if you're not in it. I can, but that's...
I have... Yeah. We were talking today about the systematic nature of those things and how barrier to entry is the nature of any...
It's so large.
Anything.
It's so large. If you go in neuroscience or anything touching depression and everything, because it's such a big field from the pharmaceutical industry, the level of entry is absurd. What you have to know it's insane.
Yeah. Well, about system-based thinking in any like large system, in industry or business or industry specifically, I guess is the easiest way to do it, or field. Like I would describe medical science as, right? I mean,
it's a field.
It's a large industry.
It's a field. It's a very large industry.
And what ends up happening is once you get to a certain level, most of the game, not most, but a very large percentage of the game isn't doing what you do and doing it well and marketing and doing the actual business side of it. At least probably 50% of your efforts involve creating barriers to entry to prevent other new rebellious ideas coming in and undercutting you within your own industry.
There's been that in the car industry. Yeah. When diesel came about, when electric cars came about, like they tried to kill Tesla for years.
There's an interesting talk about advertising in this. This is a good deal, right? So if I'm Coca-Cola, right, fortunately, I can spend a shitload of money on advertising. Fact is, I don't have to right now.
Yeah.
I just don't have to.
Yeah.
But if Julien soda comes into the market and comes in hot, Julien doesn't have the resources to spend as much money. Yeah. So this curve and the amount of money he can get by throwing stuff at, that curve will be the exact same. So once he starts spending money, As long as I just increase the same amount that he does,
Yeah.
you will never ever catch up. And then
nothing
once you spend more, that curve dumps down. So you're fucked.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to just establish a baseline. You have the basic stuff of your advertising is built you over years. And then once somebody comes into your market, increase your spending same as them until they die.
Exactly.
And then you end up still the same. They'll never cover any ground on you. And that's the nature
the gap
of the game.
will always be the same.
Advertising is as important for keeping people out as it is getting your new customers in. It's very, very interesting. And I see a lot of that though with medical science is that now with the
medical
with peer
engineering,
review, with
peer review is a big one.
With research grants, all of this now there is this huge barrier to entry, and not just to get into the field, but barrier to new ideas.
Yeah, but I think that's the biggest one, because if you want to get a PhD, you got to be a good boy.
Yeah.
We saw that with the Copenhagen interpretation, where you couldn't question it until like 10, 20 years ago. So that's 1920. So literally for 60, 70 years, you were not allowed to question the Copenhagen interpretation. Literally you were, and that's been talked about many, many times. If you try to do your PhD thesis on something close to that, against it, they would tell you won't get it.
Yeah.
So, and in physics, right, on something that should be, like clear cut, and it's always been like that. So they kill the new ideas. Like if you want any type of career, whenever you see a PhD, you have someone who had to be a good boy at some point to get going.
Never attack the cathedral.
Exactly.
Once you come at the shrine, man, they're hot. Right. That's very interesting. And but anyway, let's go on to the thing with this.
And so my idea was, first of all, as a fuel, that then again, that one is speculative. That's an idea, but it kind of makes sense to me, so I want to test it. I'm not 100% on it yet, but I would like to test. Like for example, someone doing a lot of pure cardio, or at least let's not say causation. I don't want to say causation, but at least correlation. The correlation is there.
Which is where I think you have to start.
You have to start. Like
we talk with data-driven science. We have data.
You have to have an hypothesis first.
We have data, and from these data, some of these correlations, we can form a new hypothesis.
Exactly. So
that's what you're doing.
So I have a hypothesis of what depression is when it comes to lactate. So one is inflammatory, the other one is epigenetics, and the third one is fuel. Fuel is where I'm the least certain, but it does make sense to me. So that's an hypothesis. So I have that hypothesis that there's a fuel deficit in depression because of MCT4 and then the fast twitch sympathetic nervous system, and that is something I want to test.
Yeah.
Like I'm less sure of that one, but it makes sense to me. So I'm very curious to test it, right? But I thought that was an interesting point, because again, movement pattern equals depression, right? And again, if you look at lactate as a astrocytic signaling molecule of the LC, and that means norepinephrine, that means posture. So posture tells you a depressed person, which
is pretty much spot on.
Pretty much spot on, right? So behavior flexibility through the LC, so through norepinephrine, so the LC, back to lactate through the astrocytes. So behavior inhibition, they can't do shit. They can never do anything.
Yeah.
That's what, people are depressed. They can't do. Yeah. That's behavior inhibition. That's back into the LC. That's back norepinephrine, astrocytes, lactate. Yeah. You're making a nice round circle.
And from an energy conservation, that sounds exactly right. In the absence of fuel,
or in a deficit of fuel, you have to save.
You're getting good at making those fucking covering your gaps.
Exactly.
Like absence, deficit.
It's not the same. No, they're coming. Yeah.
So
because I know what I'm tiptoeing into.
Exactly. So with a deficit of fuel, it would make sense to go to some sort of energy conservation.
You know what that reminds me of? Selfish brain theory.
Yeah. Well, and just think about it too. What happens to your body if you don't? Let's just talk general caloric fuel. You do not have enough food. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your energy conservation is going to take over.
Right. Yeah.
That's very.
But so because then you can go to obesity, toward, depression. They don't move. They don't get the MCT4. So, but they still need the lactate. So the fatter they get, the more lactate they produce.
Lactate produced from the fat.
Right. From the fat tissues. Yeah. Right. So, and then by the way, mass, you still have a development of muscle because they have to carry around, but I bet you it's mostly slow oxidative fibers. So they compound the issue that way. Because the point then would be MCT4s. That'd be the secret.
Yeah.
Please don't make a pill.
Yeah, don't make a pill.
Don't make a pill.
Yeah.
Even if I'm right, don't make a pill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, because you being right means that the pill is not the solution. Right.
Yeah, but okay. let's go into this.
You're like, these fucking guys.
Yes, okay. Well, you'll see what I mean. Let's go into it. Do you want to go anti-inflammatory first? So I need my notes on this because the names are a fucking nightmare. So as a rule, I do not memorize what I can look up.
Yeah.
So that's why I have notes, because I refuse to memorize what I can look up.
Yeah.
That's why, thank God. Actually, I didn't say that. Einstein said it.
Yeah.
You want to go anti-inflammatory, or we want to go epigenetics first?
Let's go anti-inflammatory.
Anti-inflammatories. Right.
I think epigenetics is a very open-ended conversation with this one that I want to speculate a lot on.
Yeah. Right. So we saw that. So I can go into these two enzymes. Let me take at one because that one is a big one. It's an enzyme called COX2. That one, I don't know my notes, I know that one. COX2, COX2, is an enzyme that is responsible for inflammation and pain. I don't like when they say pain because pain is cognition. Mm-hmm. But it's an enzyme that fucks you up. Okay. Inflammation and causes enough problems to cause pain down the line through cognition. Cognition is also relating to norepinephrine, so there's an entire rabbit hole in that one anyway. The COX2, so that enzyme is being inhibited by one on a study by a simple injection of lactate. One injection of lactate was shown to inhibit the COX2 enzyme going around,
which would then in turn inhibit inflammation.
Exactly.
Perception of pain. Cognition
right. Exactly. Right. So lactate as an anti-inflammatory. So there's an NOS1. NOS is from nitric oxide. Okay. Right. NOS1, an expression of that can lead to inflammation as well and everything. It's okay. But even if we look at the COX2, there's more. But I just want to focus on one. The reason I want to focus on that one, COX2, is because that fucking COX2 is what Vioxx was doing. You remember Vioxx? That painkiller I was taking in Brazil, where I thought I was going to get an aneurysm. Too, right? Yeah. Because it killed fucking people. That's why. It gives them like heart issues. Me, I thought I was going to die of an aneurysm. My brain was 3 times the size of my skull when I was taking it. Yeah. Like that's when I had the 8 hours of microsurgery. Yeah. And I went on Tylenol instead. Because I was like, I'm going to die. Yeah. I was like, first of all, I'm dumb as the fucking donkey. Yeah. Actually, that's not true because donkeys are smart. So I was a lot dumber than that.
Just as stubborn as a
donkey. I was almost as dumb as a social justice warrior. Maybe not, but not far. That's why I stopped because I was like, okay, I can't do that. Yeah. Oh my God. That means that my brain stopped working a long time ago. At this point, I don't think there's gray matter left. Think that you go on autopilot at that stage, you know what I mean? Young enough, you don't even know. It's like, it's okay, just go die. It's all good. Yeah. So Vioxx was created to have an inhibition of the COX2. Okay. One dosage of lactate was shown to have the same stuff. Okay. Right, so that's why. Talking about pills, trust me, they don't need. But so lactate has a major anti-inflammatory quality. We know that depression and inflammations are linked. We've seen that depression through nutrition. Remember the carnivore diet was made famous by Dr. Jordan Peterson's daughter. Yeah. Michaela?
I believe that is correct.
Michaela Peterson, who has an autoimmune disease, a really bad one. But in one of his talks, he was saying that she cured depression through her diet.
Which is essentially with the reduction of inflammation. Yeah.
Right, so inflammation from the gut. There's been proven that inflammation in the gut, because of nutrition, also had a direct link, not causation, correlation, always, with depression. We know on that one, we know there's the gut when there's 2 specific type of, gut flora, enterotype missing, you get depressed people and everything. So anyway, we know there's a direct link between inflammation in the body and depression. And so lactate is a major anti-inflammatory, at least in the brain.
In the brain, specifically, we know that for sure.
No, we know everywhere. Okay. But yeah, we know why, because we've seen that on major traumatic events.
So let me walk through this.
Especially in the brain, though.
So an excess of lactate in the blood, however, is going to do what? It should...
Well, that's the question.
Yeah, so an accumulation.
No, okay, so then we're going to go into acidosis, except it doesn't seem to be true. There's a major problem with what they call lactic acidosis. They say that, lactic acid is being produced and, you get the ion H+ going one way, lactate the other way. The problem is, thermodynamically speaking, you cannot have an acidosis happening with a pH between 6 and 7.5. We had 7 on the pH level. Basics, maybe.
Yeah.
But so you can't have lactic acid in a living system.
Yeah.
So
that's not what it is.
No. So that's why there's by the way, acidosis is a problem for the body. The idea that it comes from lactate is that hydrogen ion plus,
it's a bit tenuous.
Like the more they're looking at it, you know what this came from? It's because lactate is a waste product.
Yeah.
So therefore, we put all
the
evil,
everything,
every single evil of this earth was dumped on lactate.
Yeah.
And so lactate.
This is the drawer in your house when you come in the door. We open it and it's got all your old keys and fucking library cards you ain't seen in 6 months. And pocket lint.
They saw lactic acid, but transformed right away because again, you cannot have acidosis in a living system, thermodynamically speaking.
Yeah.
So they saw lactic acid, like lactate H+, done. Put it in that box, and the H+ ions and everything, even though we've seen a buffering of acidity from that and stuff like that. So you go, ooh, so it's not that simple. The truth is the muscular fatigue, so we're still not sure.
Yeah.
That's the truth. It's still, why? Because we've never looked at lactate as a fuel. Even though it's been there since at least 1930 and probably before. I think actually before that, he has changed the conversation on a regular basis. So yeah, we're not engineering, man.
Yeah,
we're playing with stuff we still don't fully understand.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Even lactic acidosis, it's not that simple.
And so it really is probably more a matter of not, say, a big excess accumulation of lactate when we talk about these small issues, like inflammation.
But there is accumulation. By the way, you're right. For example, like.
But when I say so, if we're having issue producing lactate generally, right? You're not
or carrying it,
producing or carrying it or whatever. At that point, then a person would see excess.
Right. So there's an entire. Right. So no, excess of lactate in the blood will not lead to inflammation. That comes from something else. Now the question.
No, I'm saying not enough production of lactate would lead to inflammation.
If you were to have something provoking an inflammation, having a deficit of lactate would make the inflammation go up because there's nothing fighting it. Yeah. So for example, a low-grade sympathetic response, constant stress, or as I believe, constant carbohydrates, without enough lactate would lead to an inflammation.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
I believe is what I explain. When you have a lot of carbs, you better train like a motherfucker.
Would it drive the state, if you will, of inflammation, but not have the tools of the actual muscle use?
So, there's a rabbit hole if we go this way. Like we know, so from what the testing we've been doing, anxious people have more lactate in their blood. Like okay. So does that mean that the lactate is not supposed to be in the blood? So it's signaling something to the body to say fucking move around.
Yeah.
Because it's not supposed to be in the blood. It's supposed to be in the muscle. It's supposed to be in the brain. It's supposed to be in the heart. It's supposed to be everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So is it possible that there is a range past which the body starts to freak out, past range of lactate in the blood, past which the body starts to freak out through some kind of signaling that I have not figured out yet?
No.
You know what I mean? Because remember, at first we saw that more lactate in the body was fastening rigor mortis in dead people. You put more lactate, rigor mortis sets in faster. So is it like a glue that needs to be kept liquid?
Yeah.
And so in the blood, the body is like, I don't want it in the blood.
You have to keep it in solution or else.
Right, exactly, but not in the blood. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that would be interesting. That one is purely speculative. I don't know because I don't know that a system that signals lactate in the blood. But it would that's a possibility. Let's put it this way, right? So the system would be like, all right, you produce it, it's in the blood, let's take it somewhere. So if you were supposed to take it in the brain, but you don't have the MCT4s, it would have to be carried somewhere else. And that would lead to lactate deficit in the brain, for example. Or issues like that, or at least in the astrocytes, which over time will lead to a fuel deficit.
Yeah.
And then you're back to the selfish brain theory.
Well, and all of these, every one of these things that we catch here, when we talk about the deficiency of, say, depression, or once you get into, what's the word I would look for, where you're seeing like repetitive symptoms, where it's a pathology or whatever, you know, is that, totally brain farted here on this one.
Well, no, but you see the accumulation of symptoms. It's never like one day to the next. It's over time.
Yeah.
So that's, and you see people like go back to the same symptoms over and over again with the same behavior.
Yeah. Well, and these things become but like we've talked about before with feedback loops.
Yes,
all
exactly.
of them, it's like once you get redirected out into this thing, It's just, you just sit out there and spin until there's some sort of fundamental correction made to how you're looking at it.
Oh, okay, I gotta talk about this. You'll like this one. You'll like this one. So one injection of lactate was shown to inhibit what is called GSK3 phosphorylation. The only reason I like this one is because it reduces depression and manic behavior. You know what else inhibits GSK3 phosphorylation? Electroshocks. Electroshock therapy.
Interesting.
One dose of lactate had the same effects as an electroshock therapy, minus the overwhelming feeling, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but from a pure chemical perspective, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So interesting. So lactate does a lot of things, even not as a fuel.
Well, in that piece too, when you talk about the electroshock therapy, you mentioned the overwhelming feeling. Mm-hmm. Is there somewhere in here with lactate when it comes to prediction, correction?
Well, plus look at what it does to the muscle. It makes them contract.
Yeah.
Right. Very forcefully. Mm-hmm. So here goes type 2B, here goes MCT4, here goes straight to the brain.
Yeah.
Right. Where it helps that fucking GSK3 to inhibit anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So
there's like,
now the question is that why the electroshocks do that? I don't know. I didn't look it up. But is it partly because of the lactate?
I don't even understand how all of electroshock therapy works, like in that regard either. Like,
why would they work?
Well, well, you know what I mean? Like literally where, what,
no,
how.
Plus, why did we invent that shit? Like, did you know that this is how we treated schizophrenia not so long ago?
Yeah. As a man who has been electrocuted on accident very intensely a few times, and only casually, a couple dozen times via work and things, like that's not a thing that I don't think, it's not a tool that we need. Like, you don't need that tool. You're not helping anybody.
By the way,
also what's saying is there is interesting results from shock therapy, actually.
Oh, yeah. No, well, it works.
But I'm just like, what in the fuck?
Yeah, but so does lobotomization.
Also, well, I also want to know with this, you're like, with electroshock therapy, like, you know that didn't start with people. See, there's a guy who had an idea. And he's like, I'm going to start electrocuting these pets first. And then as soon as they'll let me, I'm just going to start hooking this shit up to people.
Yeah. But do you realize like how we treated mental illness up to 1950?
Yeah.
Electroshocks, lobotomization, all that stuff. Yeah. Like this is not medical science, it's medical engineering. Well, I keep saying it, but it's true.
And there's a whole nother thing to be where there was a gap.
It was less than 100 years ago.
Well, but there was a gap there too where I think it was somewhat improved, or at least I think its place in society was more like where it belonged, which is mental illness. So it was involved in its own thing.
Yeah.
And then there was the big, I think it was a Reagan thing, where basically it's like nah. You guys just go out there, and then when you fall by the wayside, you just become criminals, which is just like we do with drugs. And now you have mental illness, which is at the root of your homelessness, your addiction.
You got rid of
drugs,
all the asylums.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
It's nuts.
It's insane that, the god of Republicans.
There's a very, very interesting way to look at things when you look at engineering any society. It's the mentally ill, which is a significantly high percentage, and I have never seen a system that actually can manage it. Not well. And
I think it's Dostoevsky.
And definitely not humanely.
Yeah, who said that the treatment of criminals tells you a lot about society. Yeah. I think that and the mentally ill, I think that tells you a lot about the advancement of a society. Yeah. Because that you know where they put their interest in.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff like that. And then I want to go into something very important. I need the notes on this. It's the epigenetics. Yes. Right. So lactate has been proven to increase the expression of the plasticity genes. So back to neuroplasticity we're talking about. Right, so there's a few that are in cortical neurons, so some genes that are responsible for neuroplasticity. So, like the functioning of all this. It's called the ARC, the ARC, the CFOS, the ZIF268, and BDNF. Right, because they couldn't come up with normal names. So like it's not easy enough. So what we saw is in the brain of that part is very interesting. In the brain of depressed people, we see a decrease of the expression of the genes ARC, and ZIF268 in the prefrontal cortex. You heard me talk about all this. And in the people not depressed, but like that was on mice, that suffer from social defeat stress, right? They saw the decrease of the expression of those genes in the medial prefrontal cortex. What interests me is that the medial prefrontal cortex on the left is the seat of the me.
Well, that sounded very much, everything you described in that symptom sounds very task negative.
Right, yes, it's a sense of
Default
self.
network.
Yeah, exactly. Default network. So those specific two genes are shown to have a decreased expression in depressed people and people suffering from the social, what they call social defeat stress, right? And we saw that through the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of self, the cognition, very important stuff. A dose of lactate was increasing the expression of those genes that I listed. One dose.
Changing the expression. Which is a thing
that's epigenetics.
Epigenetics is a thing that I look at very much. It's so interesting to me because I view epigenetics as this thing we talk about with with artificial intelligence, with AlphaZero, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where I view epigenetics as we talk about the way that you basically test and rewrite your own, it's the own software being rewritten all the time. Is it when there's an epigenetic change, a change in the way gene expresses, it's kind of is changing the way that you are. That is an update to the operating system now. And that is it. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be changed.
You know the DNA, your DNA and the RNA.
Yeah.
It's, totally.
And so that is very, very much, I think, very interesting. It's your software update.
Yep.
And I think that they're not always positive if you've had an iPhone.
Well, if you ever had a Windows,
But I do think that that is really at the root of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think epigenetics is going to be a thing that's going to float to the front once we start figuring shit out for real, that everything starts to point towards an epigenetic, not solution, but epigenetic
at least
correlation.
Yeah, correlation. At least it's in there.
And that's usually when I think you're on track.
Yep.
Specifically with some of the stuff with nutrition and epigenetics, when you start seeing those things tied together, now that's what makes sense. Specifically carbs and epigenetics, and you start to say like, well, now this changes fundamentally the way you are, the way your genes express, the way
nervous system, all that stuff will be shown to have the stuff there. And again, this is not lactate as a fuel. This is lactate as a epigenetic, whatever it's called. Yeah. So I thought it was very interesting. And then the last one, because that one I had to put in, it was back to epigenetics. That's why when you see mRNA like this, it's epigenetics, right? A regulator of the serotonin receptor P11. So it's a protein that amplifies the 5-HT signaling. 5-HT, remember when I talked about the 5-HT TP? It's the gene expression toward the production of serotonin toward the brain.
Yeah.
Right, so P11 is a receptor, a serotonin receptor, it's a protein anyway. So the lactate allows a, what do you call that? Because it's a receptor, I want to make sure I get the proper wording. It amplifies the signaling. So it makes the P11 receptor just go work harder. So even lactate has an effect on serotonin. The 5-HT TP, like all branch gene towards serotonin, which we know is has to do with depression as well. So if you look, there's two types of, there's one other, but there's two main types of antidepressants. You got norepinephrine and serotonin. Both of them are linked to lactate.
Yeah.
I mean, so no matter what, whenever you talk about depression, you round yourself to lactate. Whether you talk about it as a fuel, whether you talk about it as an anti-inflammatory, whether you talk about from epigenetics perspective, from a gene expression, from norepinephrine to serotonin, you're back to lactate.
And it very much seems though like a regulatory device across the board on all of it.
It's nature's gold, it seems, because you see it everywhere you look.
Yeah.
Like it's the number one, it's more than a fuel then. Yeah. So it seems to be what we run on. Lactate is the shit.
Yeah.
Like it's literally the shit we run on. It's the battery source, man. That's why it's crazy that we listed it as a waste product.
Yeah, got it. So wrong. If that's the case.
But as wrong as you could make it. So imagine the size of the mistake. If all this is true, that the body is almost one of the body's, if not the greatest, molecule, was seen as the enemy instead of the greatest benefactor.
Yeah.
And 100 years of that. Because one dude said it, and we could not get our eyes off of that as a species. Even though some have said it. That's true. Right?
Yeah.
Imagine the damage, one dude, by sticking an electrode in a frog's leg, chicken, because we eat both in France. And he just came to the wrong conclusion. And 100 years later, we have to deal with the shit.
And
Isn't that crazy?
Well, I think that's the issue with not...
That's science for you.
Testing a hypothesis after you've created it. Or if so, not allowing any holes in that to really rise to the top.
But also like our cultural system, like, because science cannot be separated from scientists. It also shows you that sometimes you get lucky enough to get Einstein. Sometimes you get lucky enough to get Carl Friston. And a lot of times you don't.
Yeah.
You get a dude that takes the wrong conclusion and screws up everything, even on something that big for 100 years.
Yeah.
So you see why now I say logical evidence is important? Because if you don't know how to think, I don't care what's in front of you, you're going to fuck it up.
That's been the thing that I've seen a lot in... that's what people explain about when they talk about science or college or university or even mathematics now. It's not even the information, man. So we teach you how to think. We teach you how to solve complex problems. Yeah. And the more that I look into any of it I think it really teaches you how not to think.
Yes, it's memorization.
I think it very much teaches you how to lean and appeal to authority.
Totally.
And how to make sure that you can just parrot somebody else's message.
Exactly.
And you don't need to have a message.
It's appeal to authority every time. Yeah. It's like, this person said this, this person said that.
I'm a healthcare professional.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Great.
Right. What does that even mean?
Wonderful.
Like, we are too. And by the way, you still haven't seen the video that I put it.
Yeah.
So you come at us with a bullshit modeling saying da-da-da, but you still haven't heard Carl Friston saying it's improper. Carl Friston tells you like the model is not done well, and you as a healthcare professional will not even look at it, then you don't want to change your mind. You never were interested in a conversation.
Well, and that's...
You're just spewing your own opinions like they're fucking the Bible, that's all.
Well, it's beyond confirmation bias. It's drones.
No, it's just... It's drones. It's drones. It's the refusal to consider changing your mind. It's not even changing your mind. Yeah. It's not even accepting the idea of changing your mind. That's how far they go now. It wasn't enough to be blunt. It's now you have to go past the idea of changing your mind. You don't even accept that. Yeah. Jesus Christ, man. And they're all those people are on Vioxx, I'm telling you. Like they have a new drugs and that's what he's doing to everybody. Yeah. And the social justice warrior got the mega XL dose.
Well, we're going to do a big one, I think the next one or the next one will be
would like to.
In the cave and out of the cave stuff, which will
Inside the cave, outside the cave, masculine versus feminine energy.
Yeah.
Which I believe is important because
I think it's going to be a really, really interesting conversation.
Because you'll go at it from system, I'll go at it from masculine versus feminine, where I think we stand as a society today. Yeah. Not men versus women, masculine versus feminine. Yeah. Which is a typical archetype, but not always true.
Not universal.
Nope. Depends.
But I would say people, beyond a pure generality, though, it is absolutely
it's an archetype.
Truly, that exists for a reason.
But it's even if you look percentage-wise, it's a fact. Yeah. It's like saying men are outliers. Yeah. Yes, not all men are outliers. Not all outliers are men. Yeah. But as a generalization, you can say men are outliers. Yeah. You have more Mozart than Jack the Ripper.
Men are physically stronger than women. Not all.
Not all men are strong. Not all strong people are men, but men are stronger. Yeah. If we're going to compare, yes, overall. And again, Mozart, Jack the Ripper, mostly men. Yeah. No, not always good. No. Obviously.
So, well, that's got us wrapped up. We have a mentoring program call here soon.
Let's do this.
Julien is basically rushed from here to the office to back here to podcast and then
to the call. And then we go on the boat.
And we are doing a boat trip tonight.
Yeah.
So
it'll be cool.
Yeah, boat trip on the canal tonight. I tidied up the beard. I actually didn't even notice this until after I got all
because the episode. And
I was like, I got the microphone still like way over on the side of the tit here, so I'm not scrubbing the beard on it, but it's not an issue anymore.
By the way, are we eating before the boat?
It's a good question. I'll probably eat something.
I eat something too.
Something. Yeah. Yep. Because the boat is, what was it? It was
cheese and wine.
Cheese and wine, and then, but here's the deal: they count the kids as adults, Like, it's just how many... Well, you pay for an adult ticket if the kids are older than 11. Now, obviously, the kids can't drink the wine, but I'm guessing they're going to bring enough wine as if that was an adult.
Sounds good to me.
So,
there you go.
So, all right. Well, we'll see you in a couple days, and Inside the Cave, Outside the Cave should be next.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.